Welcome to the Biz Coach Show. In every episode, we share information and advice for small business owners, small business leaders, startups, and entrepreneurs preparing to launch their business. Our mission is to give entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. If you're in need of business coaching, head over to mybizcoaches.co and book your free coaching consultation today. The Biz Coach Show is presented by Eric Whitmoyer, the owner of My Biz Coaches, a business coach, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, as well as David Macon, a certified professional in talent development, growth expert, writer, and small business strategist. Well, Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, David. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really good. Excited for today's episode. If you haven't joined us the last couple of episodes, we are working through a series of articles that Eric is putting out as part of his newsletter, which if you are not subscribed, be sure to connect. They're on LinkedIn. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, just scan the QR code. He's got two different newsletters. He's got the Entrepreneur's Edge and the Biz Coach Notes. So definitely check them out. But the series is 8 extremely important business trends to prepare for heading into 2024. And we're on week 3, which is all about sustainability. And so today we're going to be talking about kind of the importance of sustainability from a number of different perspectives as it relates to your business. And Eric, as we were kind of talking about the article, talking about sustainability, I think one of the first things that you noted was it all starts with a change in perspective or a paradigm shift. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that the people are demanding more eco-friendly products and services. The practices of our companies that we're expecting that these companies will take on. And so let me back up and share something here. So I grew up in an era where in the 70s and 80s when companies got away with stuff that was, today would, let's be clear, people probably still get away with some things, but there was an era in the 70s and 80s and probably before that, but I was in the 70s and 80s. For instance, my grandfather worked at a tanning mill where they tanned leather to make purses and jackets and stuff like that. And he contracted cancer and he was, the town was 550 employees, or 550 people who lived in the town.
We're all employees of the tannery.
Exactly. And he drove, I want to say it was like 45 minutes to the tannery to where he worked. And many people in that town worked at that tannery. Many of those same people contracted the same type of cancer, right? We've seen these stories on, in the movies, and they tell these big stories where somebody comes in. It was the Aaron Brockovich, and a lot of these different movies where they played roles. And so my point is I grew up at a time where people really got away with some shady poop. And so, to say that I'm passionate about this, there's something to be said for that from that perspective, because there's a lot of companies, and I won't call out names, but there are a lot of companies that have done some things over the years, and a lot of Superfund sites and things like that. I actually did a paper in college about Superfunds and the amount of money that companies were having to spend to clean up sites that they hadn't taken care of and things like that. So people my age and older have that in their head when we talk about being eco-friendly and that kind of stuff. And so there's some perspective of that in this that I don't know if it came out in the way that I wrote the article, but it's definitely reflective in some regards of that for me. Certainly for the flip side to that, though, David, is, and I'm using it to kind of introduce this whole thing. There are other people where it's cool.
Yeah.
And as you know, with me, that's not my take on this whole thing. Right? It's like
sure.
I'm not what's hip and cool necessarily.
You're the epitome of not hip and cool, I think. Really,
I am hip and
cool.
Cool.
Too far.
Exactly. Thank you, David. But I do believe, not to put light to that, but I mean, the reality is that it is hip and cool, today for whatever reason. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to bring attention to this, because like I said, there's not that long ago, companies were doing things that were atrocious that they got away with some of the things they got away with. Some of it was just ignorance. Others was just malpractice. But the point is, at the end of the day, it existed. And so I think that there's some healthy things here that should take place. What I don't care for, and I know you feel the same way, is when people are, it's the hip cool thing, and that's not what I'm about. And more importantly, the take on the article was really of, as a small business owner, knowing this is something that is going to get more and more attention. And I have a few things that aren't necessarily included in the article that I think are relevant for us to address. And I think I know you can appreciate some of these things, but is the idea that technology, because you know how big I am on technology, is evolving at such a rapid pace, and we can be better. I think that's the part that I really want to implore people to understand, is that we can be better. We have the technology to be better with some of the things that we're doing when it comes to sustainability, to reduce our carbon footprint, or, any of those kinds of things. I'm less emotionally attached to that and more attached to the idea that there's, from a business owner perspective, there are things in this that we should be taking a hard look at, because they are going to be beneficial to us in the short run, as well as the long run, as a species, right, on the planet. But that all aside, I think it's relevant to kind of bring that up. And I know, as we talk through this concept, it's really helping people understand that there's generally speaking, you would think this is kind of the big companies and that they're going to be involved in this. And so what I tried to pull out of this is, how does this impact the smaller companies, the Main Street companies that we typically work with more closely? And to that point, what kind of impact is this going to have for them in 2024? And as you know, my entire focus for this is really on the idea of, how can you prepare for it, right? It's the biggest rub for me is people say that and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's this topic or some other topic, but as a coach, it's coming. You're not an ostrich. You can't put your head in the sand and ignore it. Right. And that, unfortunately, is probably the biggest challenge that we have, particularly with small to mid-sized companies, because owners are like, I can't impact it, so why do I bother?
Yeah.
Well, you may not be able to impact, right, the movement, whatever you want to call it, right? It's coming, right? But that you can prepare your business so you don't get blindsided by something that ends up hurting the business. And that's kind of where, you got to be willing to look a little bit further down the road to see the potential. And then that often will, kind of give you some guidance and say, okay, a lot of this doesn't pertain to me, but this in fact will. And I should probably pay attention to that, right?
Yeah, so, something, Eric, I forget if it was a long run or long game, but that's what kind of keeps going through my mind as you're talking about this, is really, this is not a marketing tactic. It's not a way to garner goodwill. I mean, sure, those things may come. Those are, side benefits. But I think really on a long enough timeline, this is a strategic planning element, right? It is, are your business practices sustainable? Are you using, vendors, or is your supply chain sustainable, right? All of those things, because you could have maybe you're doing everything right, but maybe use a supplier that is not, and all of a sudden they get shut down by the EPA or whatever, and now your business is at risk because you lost your main supplier. So when you look at sustainability from that lens, it's kind of a strategic imperative.
Absolutely. And I think that you saying that in and of itself is indicative of exactly what we're talking about here. When we're on the show, is that the reality is there may not be something that you specifically need to do differently, but to your point, if the vendor that I'm buying particular products from, for instance, pest control, wouldn't necessarily think anything of that, but there's a lot of eco-friendly kind of challenges that are evolving in the pest control industry. And where we're sourcing the products that they make pest control, not only this evolved during COVID, when we couldn't get some of the things that we needed to get from where we were getting them from, i.e. China, but in addition to that, they started recognizing that certain practices were being done, and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to allow that here in the United States anymore. Well, if that changes who you buy your product from, because now it's outlawed here and you can't get it, that's going to dramatically impact your business. So it's like I said, you can bury your head in the sand and be like, well, I can't control that. Well, if they shut down your supply source, that's going to impact your business pretty big, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
that was the intent that I had in, with
Yeah.
this particular article, and recognizing, for the small business owners, mid-sized business owner, these are the things we need to be prepared for. And when we talk about the paradigm shift, it's really, we can't ignore these things any longer. We have to
Yeah.
recognize that they are coming, whether it's a federally mandated thing or it's the right thing to do or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's more prevalent with the people in the United States than ever before.
Yeah.
Throughout the world, not just the United States, but it's more prevalent than it's ever been. And we're going to have to be consciously aware of that when we're making strategic decisions in our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into maybe one of the other things that you mentioned, or that we talked about, which is, there is an element of this that if you want to retain and attract customers, you need to adopt these practices because, whether it's demographics, generational, whatever, more and more consumers prefer to shop and spend their money with sustainable businesses. So maybe talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting is myself, my family, we do a lot of, we buy our meats through local, what do they call them, the meat boxes or whatever you call those
Yep.
types of companies, right? So, and in the last 3 years, there's been a significant focus on all the packaging that's being shipped in is all 100% biodegradable.
Wow.
So it's all recyclable. I take the entire box and all its contents. Once the dry ice is dissolved, it's like everything else can throw in the recycle.
Wow.
And I'm a little green when it comes to recycling. I think if we can do something like that, if it's just a matter of sorting my trash, I can do that. I'm comfortable with that, and I think it's the right thing to do. But regardless of whether you believe it or isn't, the reality is the fact that they are using contents, the box and packaging material and everything in it can all be recycled. I think that's an intelligent thing to do.
Yeah,
right.
it is.
And all the packaging is made by recycled material.
Right.
So not only are they recycling, but they're using recycled material to make the boxes. So that in itself is indicative of things that we're going to see in the future. And that's a great example of a particular company. It's that we mentioned pest control. My family chooses to pick a pest control company that uses the products that they use or are organic, right?
Yeah.
That's something that people are paying attention to. We do it because we want to make sure that our pets and our children are all healthy and don't have issues, and whatever else might come from that. But the reality is that some people are worried about it, other people aren't. But as a employee or as a business owner, I need to be cognizant of that because more and more people are aware of this and they're choosing to make those decisions.
Right.
So to your point, people are actually choosing to stay with or go to companies for their services because they choose to do that.
Well, and I think so speaking of your packaging example there, I think that's a really interesting one because it's not fundamentally altering the nature of the business. It's not, changing logistics and shipping, right? All those sorts of things. It's selecting a different source for your packaging material that happens to be biodegradable. And I think that's a good example of that. That's a simple choice. There may be, potentially an incremental cost, maybe not, but I think the perception that you get from your current and future customers of using sustainable packaging would potentially offset that, right? It's a competitive advantage now over another, meat subscription box that doesn't, right? And if it's local, well, okay, now you're not increasing your carbon footprint with massive shipping and all those sorts of things. And so now you can compel or share a compelling narrative about your business sustainability, which really, that was your core business model to begin with, but you're shifting and highlighting those sustainable elements, so that really resonates with people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to your point, that's really kind of the thing. It's I'm not trying to change my entire business model. I'm just saying where I can make intelligent decisions to adapt and play closer to that space, then why not?
Yeah.
Right. If to your point, if there's a slight incremental cost in the packaging material, my bet is you make up for it in people who select your services because you do provide that. Now, that doesn't take away the fact you still got to provide a good quality product and your service has to be, exceptional and all that kind of stuff. You're not just going to get clients because you use eco-friendly material. But if you add that to an already good business model, it's only to your advantage. And so that's the strategic, let's think 2-3 years down the road. and this is impactful. This is important to a certain set of our generations that, as the younger generations are definitely paying more attention to that.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead.
And as a coach, I appreciate this is if your margins aren't strong enough to sustain a 4 cent per packaging increase, like then you probably have bigger issues than sustainability. Right.
Great
So
point.
these generally are not massive. It's not like double the cost of packaging.
Right.
It's,
Right.
5% more, or whatever. So you should be able to absorb those over the course of time.
Yeah. And to your point, as a coach, I would probably encourage you not to try and go that route if that was the case. Right. But where you can, why not? Right. And that's kind of the logic behind this whole piece. And I think, like I said, you're just getting more attention. More people are paying attention. More people are conscious of this. And I think that, there's nothing, I'm a big fan of the ocean, lakes, river, and nothing bores me more than when I see the pictures of the trash in our waterways.
The trash islands. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. It is. And it's because I'm such a big fan of the ocean, and then you go to the ocean and you see trash on the beach and it's washed up, and we're not perfect. We're human beings. We make poor decisions at times, and people do things that are whatever. But the point is, at the end of the day, I've seen some amazing technology, as I referenced earlier, about how they can improve and actually clean the waterways with these different technology that's available today. And it's super impressive, right? I mean, it's not on a large scale. However, if the right people who made the right decisions were actually looking at the right things, we'd probably see a lot more of this. I don't want to get political, but the stuff that actually would make a significant impact is not getting the attention it should, in my opinion, in some regard. So again, I'm not ringing the green peace sign or anything like that, but I am saying that if we can do things to improve the ecology, then we should be doing it, right? And I know I've researched the technology that's out there, and there's a lot of opportunity. And you and I are both passionate about solar.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's tons of opportunity on solar. There's still gaps. There's still things that need to be resolved with that technology. I've read and paid attention to a lot of Musk's concepts and insights on the technology, and other people like him. And I know there's a ton of potential, but it's not getting the amount of attention it should, because some of the right people aren't paying attention to it.
Yeah. Well, jumping a little bit ahead here, and then we can circle back. But you had a note in your article about innovation and differentiation. I think that really fits in nicely here, because I think you're going to see whole market segments, right, that open up and create new opportunities for people to come in and offer a sustainability type solution. Whether that's, I think about like carpet cleaning. It used to be really, everybody kind of did the same thing. Maybe there's a little bit of this or same day or whatever, but now you have, hey, we don't use chemicals at all. It's all steam, right? So you've got somebody coming in, innovating kind of a dinosaur industry and approaching it from a more eco-friendly perspective. You've got, talking about trash cleanup, there's whole companies that's their business model, is they get, funding from different municipalities, governments to go out and do that kind of work. And I think more and more, you're probably going to see, whether that's coming from the private sector, from consumers, or, government budgets, there's going to be more opportunities for people to create businesses around sustainability and kind of, create a whole new opportunity for themselves.
Right. And it's funny, because you and I were both in the same industry for a number of years, and the electronics industry as a whole is a huge piece of this, right?
Right.
Recycling electronic equipment, right? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember back when recycling toner cartridges was a big deal. It's like now it's the electronic technology. And the issue is you get a phone, and the technology advances so quickly that a phone could be, 6 months, a year, within 2 years. I mean, it's pretty much a dinosaur, and it'll last for another 2, maybe 3 years. Now, this will slow down eventually, because what will happen is the technology and evolution but the technology advancements will move to some other product, like some implantable device or something like that. But the point is, computer monitors. I mean, I'm going to tell you that we probably have 15 around my house, 15 different computer monitors.
Yeah.
because I feel guilty throwing them away. I don't know what to do with them. So I'm like, and I'm sure I could donate them or something like that. It's just a matter of taking the time to figure it out, but I won't just throw it away. Right.
Yeah.
And
E-waste recycling, man. That's the way to do it.
What's that?
I said e-waste recycling.
E-waste, yeah, exactly. So my point is that we've seen these things, and it's going to get progressively worse, right? And we just a matter of what can we pay attention to. So here again, you mentioned this as we look at the technology evolution as it relates to eco-friendly solutions and things like that. There are new business models being created. Right. There's opportunities for somebody to come in and play in that space. The electronics recycling is a pretty significant one, and it's taken place over the last 10 years, has really evolved. And I don't think that enough time and energy has been focused on that. But if somebody had the passion for it and had the technical acumen to kind of tie it all together, there's a couple of people that have really made some advancements in that. And you could really take that to the next level. Just tons of opportunity there. What's interesting is that for years, and you may or may not remember this, but for years, the advanced countries would take their technology after they'd used it, exceeded its useful life, and then they would sell it in third world countries. Well, today, those third world countries are buying the exact same pieces of equipment we're buying in the more advanced countries, because technology's accelerated at such a rate that nobody's buying the used equipment. So what do you do with it now? So you really, truly have to figure out a way to what you're going to do with that technology, that used equipment now.
Yeah. Well, and it's not always creating a new industry or a new business, right? It's, could you offer a more eco-friendly product line within your existing business, or over time convert your fleet of trucks to electric, or it depends what industry you're in, right? But there's all sorts of different ways you could approach that same concept, and I think the key is to become the default. What I mean by that is, if you're looking at two similar solutions, right, two similar businesses, customers will default to the one that's more sustainable, right, if it's presented correctly. And I think that's the goal is, we're going to be apples to apples and we're sustainable. Well, if I've got the choice of spending $1,000 here or $1,000 here, I'm going to go the more sustainable route, right? And now you're the default choice when you're compared apples to apples.
Exactly. And that's where, again, it goes back to the point I initially started with, which is, as the small business owner, you can't avoid it. It's coming. Yeah. Right. So what can you do differently to kind of play in that space? The next section was talking about cost savings through efficiencies. And this is kind of what I was getting at with the technology. As technology evolves, we're getting more efficient with this. So we're actually creating cost savings with our recycling concepts. But, 20 years ago, it wasn't cheaper to use, recycled waste and material and stuff like that. But they're beginning to get to that point. And then the other thing you have to factor, think about this. The electric car industry would probably not exist the way that it does today had the government not been throwing huge rebates at the industry, right? That's the honest truth, right? So if the government gets in it, and I'm talking about the U.S., but that's an international thing. That was taking place in a number of countries throughout the world, right? And so they're like, we want to be, all electric cars, or so many electric cars, what percentage or whatever. So people were throwing all kinds of incentives to drive innovation in those categories of business. Same thing in solar. The solar industry wouldn't exist today the way that it is without the tax credits and the rebates and things like that. So the reality is the government gets behind these things. That's, in a sense, free money.
Yeah.
If you're an aspiring entrepreneur or looking for an opportunity, go to a category where the government's subsidizing the government subsidized the farming industry for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody knows it. So the government subsidized the oil industry and how many really wealthy people are in the oil industry.
Right.
Yep. Right. So my point is, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, or if you have a business that plays in that space or as a parallel to that space, look for the opportunities and capitalize on it. It's there that's what it's there for. Take advantage of it. Right. Capitalize. So.
Well, it's funny. Well, first of all, efficiency is one of my favorite words. I don't know if you know that, but I get excited when I hear efficiency. My son Liam teases me about it because he's like, I know efficiency, right? So I love efficiency. So I saw it. I did get a little excited. Maybe my favorite section of the article. But you probably remember this, Eric, and hopefully you do at least. When we were kind of really big going through lean and Kaizen and kind of all that stuff, you probably remember there was the example of
we watched a video, but there was a video about it. And we got excited about it, but it was about a guy examining the waste at buying a burrito from kind of a street cart vendor. And he was looking at it as just, I instead of one napkin, I got 10, and then it was in a bag, even though I'd taken the meat out of the bag and I unwrap it. And then there's, 2 layers of wrap, and they gave me 2 salsas instead of 1. And we start to look at some of those things, right? And you look at, the waste in packaging, the waste in time, that ends up in a landfill. If you look at those little things within your business, and even if you don't, move to solar or electric or whatever, but you just start to look at how can we reduce waste? That's maybe one of the easiest starting points in any business that relates to sustainability. But I think you're going to find the waste. And if you eliminate that, that is actually a sustainable thing that you're doing. And it's a great starting point.
Yeah, it's actually excellent, excellent point, because to your point, that in and of itself is the best place to start.
Yeah.
How can I reduce the amount of waste that I'm generating? And typically it's just a matter of efficiency. It's looking at my processes and systems, which very well. That's, when I started my biz coaches, one of my big things is I want to help every small business owner automate and digitize.
Yeah.
I digitize, I reduce the amount of paper. And it's not necessarily because I want to save the trees, although that's an added benefit. The reality is I don't need to have file rooms full of files of paper. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Today I can have it all.
They need printers, right? And ink, and then paper costs money. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole, and the whole bunch of opportunity there for us to save on costs. And the average small business owners think about it. We'll use my $1 billion mission. If you, David, we helped you grow to $1 million in gross revenue, and you're running on a 20% net margin, and you're making $200,000, and I can save you 5%. That's an extra $50,000 you put back into your pocket.
Right.
And I guarantee you that almost every business that we go into, we could help them find 5%.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because it's not how everyone is typically wired. You take the average small business owner and you go into that, and I guarantee you they're just not thinking that way, because they're focused, like we've said so many times before, on the day-to-day nuances of running that business. They're not taking the time to step back and reflect on it and say, could we cut back on the number of salsa packets that we give every client? Could we cut back, unless they ask, right? Could we cut back on the number of napkins we hand them, right? I think I've begun to see that in some of the McDonald's.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Like, hey, did they even give me napkins?
Yeah. People tease me for this, but Taco Bell, I specifically asked for 2 fire packets, and I got 15 for 3 items. I was like, what am I going to do with 15 packets? I mean, that's just ridiculous at that point in time. So judge me for eating a Taco Bell. I don't care, but you gotta rein in your packet distribution, Taco Bell, if you're listening. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's probably 0.25% right there.
For sure. Yeah. So awesome. Well, hey, your other topic there was compliance and reputation. You want to spend just a minute on that, and then we talk about other ways you can apply this?
Yeah. Well, so I was kind of leaning on with the compliance, the regulatory compliance is, like I said, government's going to step in. They're going to tell us what we have to do, right, when it's appropriate. I'd hate to think that we have to wait for the government to tell us what's the right thing to do. But as we've demonstrated in the past, that sometimes has to be the case. It's a little disappointing, but it is what it is, right? So at the same time, as an organization, I go back to the idea. So as you know, with my trucking business, right, I went into that eyes wide open. I was like, man, there's so much opportunity for efficiencies here. The way the industry operates today, there's so many different ways that you can cut costs, save money, reduce. That's even before you get to electric trucks. And then you start talking about electric trucks and driverless like technology. And I was just like geeking out. I'm like, this is amazing. We can change the entire world. But I think that when it comes to, regulatory compliance, paying attention to, how things are being accepted, what things are being adopted, what where those that are in power are recognizing where the opportunity, where they're basically telling you where to go, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And again, I go back to the tax credit analogy. I mean, it's like, if they're giving you tax credits, they're saying we want people to spend time and money on this solution and to resolve it, improve it, whatever the case may be. So we should be paying attention to it. And then from a reputation perspective, it's if somebody, I go back to my very, very first point. there are companies that in the past have done things and then they try to sweep it under the rug.
Right.
And there are those are companies in my head that I remember from 50 years ago, 40 years ago, that I have a distaste for.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's not going to change for the next series of generations, right? People are going to have their own personal experiences. They're going to hear stories about people who did things, companies who did things that they shouldn't have done. And that's going to resonate with people. And that impacts your business, right? That has an impact on your business. Now, how much? Yeah, it depends, right? It's hard to say. Okay. But what I can tell you is those reputations don't just go away overnight.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to add to that, especially in the world of social media, right? I mean, you can get a viral TikTok going against your non-sustainable practices, and you're contaminating the local lake, and all of a sudden that's an international viral story, and that didn't exist, 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago.
Well, that's, exactly. I mean, you take that Aaron Brockovich story, which most people old enough would remember it. Most of the younger people would be familiar with it. But if you watch the movie, just watch the movie, and you see it, you can see it now, or read the book, whichever. But the point is, you'll see what they had to go through to expose all these things.
Yeah.
Imagine that same scenario today. That was like late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
Imagine that scenario today with social media, viral social media, and mobile phones with camera.
Oh, that's it. I mean, it could even be, being a corporate whistleblower used to be kind of hard, but now you could just have some guy in the back doing a live TikTok and the whole world seeing what shady stuff's happening in your business. Even if you're, a mom and pop, restaurant or something. I mean, boom, your business is dead now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as crazy it is. I saw something on a TikTok the other day. 2 people were at a walk-up window. I think it was a drive-through, technically. They were throwing food at the employees. They had some gripe with the restaurant. I don't know exactly what the deal was. I literally I'm skimming through it, and I see it, and I watched it for a moment, probably 10 seconds or whatever. But they're literally mad about something, and they're literally throwing food at the employees through the window into the restaurant.
Jeez.
And somebody's filming the entire thing. Right.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it's so you talk about reputation. I mean, it's real quick that can get out there and spread, and so people need to be paying attention to those things.
Yeah. Hey, and sorry, it goes the other way too, right? If you're doing things that are positive, sustainable, and you have employees, or you have, a local influencer coming into a story about how you changed all of your packaging to be more sustainable and you're reducing your carbon footprint, like that can go viral. And then now all of a sudden people want to buy your product, right? Or invest in your business or whatever, right? You never know.
Yeah, exactly. To your point, absolutely can go both ways. But the point is today is that can really happen fast, where 30, 40 years ago, that didn't exist in the same way.
Yeah. And sorry, one more thought here. I know I keep cutting
but
I think you talked about government regulation, but also I think, if your business does anything internationally, more and more you're seeing other countries that are ahead of the US in their adaptation of sustainable practices and, compliance and regulations around, what can be imported in and ingredients and, components, right? Those sorts of things. So if you're doing anything international, it's even more important.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, I don't remember when the timeline was. So it was back quite some time, but there was a period of time, there were certain countries that would not import our fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's to your point. It's like, nah, you use herbicides or pesticides or whatever, we don't agree with. And so, we won't buy your, so and talk about impacting the GDP, right?
Right. Yeah. No, seriously. So, okay. That was all I had on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to transition into how small business owners can apply this?
Yeah, absolutely. So and I know you did some quick research on this, but we talk about, assess your carbon footprint. This is probably this is not your mom and pop local taco shop or something like that necessarily, but everybody can actually do this. There's a number of different companies, sites that they have available. You can go in and you can actually do a study, a quick reference on your carbon footprint to determine it. But the reality is, at the end of the day, is if you knew where you stood, right? It's like you hear me say this all the time. You have a benchmark now, right? If you know you're really bad, you're really bad, and then you can what can I do to improve that? What few things can I do that would make a significant improvement, and then do those couple of things, right? But first and foremost is start with assessing your carbon footprint. The next thing is to set clear sustainability goals. If you have specific goals, if those resonate with your employees, with your organization, or if your organization is either in a high awareness space, right? If you're in a particular category of business that would get a lot of attention, like the trucking industry or something like that, you should probably be paying attention to that, because it's going to be even more prevalent next year and the coming years after that. If the government's pushing us to be in so many electric vehicles, whether the expectation is realistic or not, it's irrelevant. The point is that if they're pushing for that, anything that's contrary to that is going to get more and more attention, so much so to the point that they will start imposing regulation. I mean, the state of California has already begun to push through what every new home needs to be built with solar. I think that was mandated a couple of years ago now. And I think that there's also a mandate that's coming in regards to cars and electric vehicles in the state of California specifically. So if you're a trucking business operating in the state of California, I know for a fact, because I had that business even 5-6 years ago, that there's a bunch of mandates coming over the coming years that are changing. Well, we went through an entire period of time where it had something to do, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but the emissions, right? The trucks had to be outfitted with the certain system that reduced the amount of emissions that they emit into the atmosphere. So point being is that was in place throughout the better part of 2010 to 2020. And that's only going to get more intricate, more the expectations are going to be higher, right? They're just going to crank down on it more and more and push you either to adapt electric vehicles or whatever else is going to solve that solution.
Yeah,
but
Eric, real quick, if you're in California and you're trying to escape those mandates, please stop moving to Utah. Okay, we're good. We got all the Californians we need. Thank you. So sorry, that was my little rant for a second.
We'll leave that alone. But yeah, I mean that's a great point though. There's people are moving from states because of certain things that they're not happy with, right?
Yeah.
The next one, the third point, was the collaborate for impact. So partner with eco-friendly suppliers. We kind of referenced that earlier. Pay attention to where your suppliers are getting their products from, and then pay attention to the regulation that may be coming, because like I said, you'd like to believe that your supplier is going to let you know that changes are coming and they're going to do the right thing and adapt accordingly so that they're not left with a bunch of old inventory, let's say. But I think we've already demonstrated many, many times over the years that people will do unethical and immoral things, like unload a whole bunch of inventory that can't be resold somewhere.
Right.
Sorry, buyer beware.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that if you're not paying attention to those things, you could get bitten, right? And that's a whole nother challenge. It's not a client of mine. It's somebody that's associated with a client of mine. Bought a bunch of material from another country, brought those products into the United States. They were not authorized within the United States, and consequently, they got stuck with $50,000 worth of stock.
Oh, geez.
That can't be sold, and now they've got to find another source. So they're trying to sell it to another country that would authorize, would accept it, where they could actually utilize it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
Yeah. And they found that out when it got to the docks, and couldn't get it through. What's the authority there that approves the customs? Yeah. They couldn't get it through customs. So, but it's like I said, you got to be paying attention to where you're sourcing, and that's a huge opportunity for a lot. The fourth one is then educate and engage your team, making people aware of it. You did a great example, David, of the restaurant analogy of let's reduce our waste, right? That in itself, we're cutting back on things that we're paying for, right? We're paying for the napkins. It may be fractions of pennies, but that adds up over time, right? It's like, it could be ketchup packets. It could be, whatever it might be. It could be your fire sauce from Taco Bell. But the reality is all of those create scenarios of waste, right? And so I'm paying for it. And in many places, commercial waste is actually a fee. There's a fee for how much waste.
Yeah.
As home users, we don't pay by the pound, but many commercial waste facilities are actually they charge by the pound for their waste. Well, so Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, and really, I mean, in the restaurant industry, right? I mean, food waste is a really big topic right now. I mean,
Huge.
it is a massive issue, especially in America. And I think, redesigning your menu or changing your portion size or whatever to reduce that is important, right? It's the ethical thing to do. It's the ecological thing to do. So, something like that is important for people to consider. Oh, and by the way, you're also spending less on that food, right? Because you're smaller portions, you redesign your menu, and so now there's a positive business impact. So that's one of those kind of win-win things you can get when you do sustainability the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And so it's talking about education and engaging the team. It's that one is I can have the education, I can share the information, I can give you the expectations of what I'd like to see done differently, but you really need to engage the team. And so, one of the challenges at that point then is that you're constantly monitoring and measuring that. So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, don't waste. There's an intentional approach to helping people understand what that looks like and breaking it down to those specific examples of how do we cut back on costs on these things, right?
Yeah.
I like to do an example. A landscaper. I met a landscaper at a networking event. I might even use this story once before, but we were talking about the space, the territory that a particular landscaper was operating in. And he said to me, he's trying to grow his business. And I said to him, how many clients do you have? And he tells me, and I said, where do you operate out of? And he's in the East Valley. Well, in Arizona, the East Valley is pretty substantial size.
Yeah.
It's probably about 60 miles from the center of Phoenix to the outskirts, probably closer to 75, depending on how far you consider East Valley. It's still within the Phoenix metro area. But, I said to him, you small operation, 2 trucks, a couple of employees. I said, so how you say East Valley, what does that look like? Right. And his description of it was 3/4 of that space that I was referring to. And, I said to him, realistically, you got people driving from, in Arizona, it's from in Phoenix, from Ahwatukee to Apache Junction. I'm like, that's not sustainable. You might have 9 clients out there. You drive out there for those 9 clients, but in the meantime, you got 2 guys sitting in a truck driving 30 miles one way with gas prices at $5 a gallon.
Yeah, you could have done 2 yards in your commute time. Yeah.
Well, and I said, that time would have been better spent driving up and down the streets of the neighborhoods where you're already highly concentrated and finding 10 new clients there.
Yeah.
You can sell those 9 clients to somebody who operates in Ahwatukee.
Yeah.
What sense does that make when you think about it? And he's like, you might still be making a profit, but how much waste is going into that? And so, and you think, well, I don't want to give up those clients. I'm like, sell the clients and find more clients where you already operate. You'll have a more productive and profitable business.
Right. Yeah. Less carbon emissions, right, and all the other stuff.
Yeah, put all that aside, right? I mean, just focus on the profitability of the business. It just makes more sense. And often those go hand in hand. That's part of the point that I'm trying to make with the whole article is it doesn't necessarily have to be just about the eco-friendly. It could be, let's make the business more profitable. And by the way, we can also be eco-friendly in the process.
Yeah.
And then the last one's just to communicate transparently, just be clear with people, share with them, don't pass it off as lip service. I think that's one of the things that this is what you hinted at. And one of your concerns about this is it just saying that I do it for the sake of saying I do it. So I can be hip and cool, right? And not cool.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, really, really good stuff. Thanks, Eric. And again, this is part of Eric's 8-week series on kind of trends to look for in 2024. This is a newsletter series. So if you're not currently subscribed to Eric's newsletters on LinkedIn, scan the QR code or check out the show notes. So you can do that. A lot of great topics coming up. Speaking of, Eric, any future topics you want to kind of give a little insight into, a little preview, or you want to keep those close to the vest for now?
Well, I'm debating on which the next one's going to be. So
all right, fair enough. So
but,
awesome.
We got some good ones coming up. So
yeah,
Very cool. Yeah, and then I'll just mention here that if you're interested in learning or maybe uncovering ways that you can make your business more sustainable, be sure to head over to mybizcoaches.co. Free consultation. Sustainability will be one of many topics that you review with Eric or one of his qualified coaches, and they can help you think about ways to improve your bottom line while becoming more sustainable as well. So anything else going on at My Biz Coaches you want to talk about, Eric, before we wrap up today?
You know what? I think I am going to tip my hat. We have a huge Black Friday promotion coming up. So I figured
nice.
I'm going to play part of that retail game. I can't get it out of my blood, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to capitalize on the Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We're going to have a promotion for that weekend. So starting, I'm not going to do it during Thanksgiving. But I will start it on Friday morning and run it through Cyber Monday, the end of the day, Cyber Monday. But we're offering a special promotion. I'll make the announcement next week once we finalize the details. But we definitely have a big promotion coming up, and then that people can capitalize on, get some extra services.
Nice. Hey, what about small business Saturday?
Oh yeah, is there Small Business Saturday? Is that?
Yeah. I'm just trying to make you give the discount to more people. So I'm hurting you, but helping our listeners and viewers. So
nice. So we got Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, and Cyber Monday. All right.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Sunday, then.
Yeah. See, perfect. So awesome. Well, that sounds great. Yeah, as we get closer, we'll post some more details on that and bring them up during the episodes.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, hey, Eric, always a pleasure. Appreciate chatting with you today. And if you don't already subscribe to the Biz Coach Show, we definitely recommend you do that. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks. Talk to you later.
See ya.